Welcome to a brand new episode of Art and About with Danny Halbin. And today I'm so pleased to find myself in the studio of Dennis Red Moon Darkeem, wonderful artist, educator, spiritual guide and healer and personality here in the Bronx. And welcome.
Thank you for having me. Dennis, mixed media visual and performance artist. A lot of my work is containing to the community that I live and work in, and a lot of the issues and the concerns of the people who live in these communities. And I do that through mixed media, collage, painting, and performance work. And you can see some of my studios. All of my works are blending different techniques to use in my classroom. I work with junior high school students here in the South Bronx. And I like to use my art as a vehicle to motivate them and also allow them to understand what's happening in their community. So a lot of my work, I work with found materials. So these are potato chip bags. And through my works, I like to have layers of messages. So I use potato chip bags to create the idea of patchwork. I am a descendant of the Yamasee Seminole tribe of Florida, and we are known for patchwork. And patchwork is actually taken from old pieces of fabric that Europeans used to create their outfits with, and the Seminoles would create patterns that gave history and also through storytelling of if you were a medicine man, if you were a farmer, if you were an educator. So I did that with these potato chip bags, and I would find these, I collect them in my neighborhood.
Come on over here.
So this piece here are talking about found materials using Metro cards, and I will cut the Metro cards to create a stencil, and the stencil becomes one bigger language once they're all together. So they all create a story. When you look around, you can kind of see language, you can see kind of a cityscape, landscape, you see symbolism, and the idea, I want people to kind of look at these symbols and kind of find something that relates to them. And I ask, the viewer, what do you see?
So artists begin with these ideas, like, having symbols of forms that could evoke certain reactions to the viewers. But then art is more than that, but we're all, as visual artists, we utilize, sort of formal elements of design and of, balance of shapes and forms and colors and ideas. So opening up each other's minds and spirits through that work.
So a lot of things that I like to work on is the idea of value, the viewer's understanding of things what does value really mean? And something that discarded, does it still hold the same value? I ask people on the street, and this is a custom that started with the indigenous people here. So the idea of bartering. And I would find things, or I would make things, and I would lay it out in the street. And I started this project from Chinatown. I started in 2013. And the idea is questioning people, the idea of value. And from the items that I make to the items that people find, and it's more about the storytelling, to their story that relates to the item that they're trading, and which pushed me later on to think about historic value. And I would find these antique land deeds, and what I would do is create collages over these land deeds to talk about the idea of value for land. It's different than the idea of value for today. And I took images of slaves and I would cover their face and masks, and to talk about the idea of who was able to have value at this time and who was able to have things of value. Taking away the identity of the face, it pushes the viewer to think of more of a historic idea of their own background, their own history.
So these are collages?
I touch on the idea of spiritual value, the connection of how do we see our spiritual relation to the earth, to our families, to people we see every day. And these collages are more of mixing this idea of African and indigenous storytelling and what does that narrative look like. And these have kind of, these layered, starting with spray paint, things like safety pins, rubber bands, created the background for these pieces, and then everything else was discarded materials.
Okay, so these are they don't have any as much obvious representational imagery in them. So tell us a little bit about what's going on here.
So this piece was inspired by actually taking a trip to like Home Depot, and it was looking at paint swatches and seeing the colors of brown, the different shades of brown, and then the names that are associated with these shades of brown. So kind of like the idea of labeling. So who designs or who says that this shade of brown is going to be Cuban coffee brown or Asian cotton brown? Like who decides these names? And using kind of barbed wire, but fake barbed wire, to this idea of being boxed into a name or a label that had nothing to do with you. These names that we call ourselves today were given to us by someone else or another group of people who was taken over. So this idea of historic value and the idea of asking the person to question who they are and what they believe in and why they believe in these things.
Okay, so Dennis, we're gonna talk about this process that you're working with. So could you tell us what's going on here?
So I believe in the power of materials. So what I like to do is bring into my class that everything they use has a reasoning and it has a message within it. So these are from the Bronx Museum. And what I do is kind of create what I call a patchwork quilt, but using imagery of the community and the Bronx. So these events are happening in the Bronx. So a lot of the imagery is from the neighborhood, from events. So this quilt here was from the Harlem Arts Festival. It was a commission for their gala. This was one of 3 pieces. The other 2 sold. This one didn't. Okay. And this was their winter brochure. No, their summer festival brochure. So I just took about 100 of them, and I would just cut. I started with the diamond shape, and I kept going with the same diamond shape. And then the imagery I thought was very strong, from the buildings to the colors, and I definitely think this very much, represents the Harlem community.
All right, so show us a little bit about your process.
Yeah, so my idea, I don't like to waste a lot of material, so I like the circle. So we're gonna do a diamond shape from the circle, and then I kind of play with the shaping of how would I place it, and maybe I continue this pattern every blue, orange, blue, orange. So that's kind of how it would start.
And then you play around with it. You're experimenting. You see how it looks as you're working, and then
add other colors, other shapes, other maybe add newspapers, different other things that would tell this narrative of the Bronx.
Okay. All right, so let's see it unfold a little bit.
Kind of keep the same.
So yeah, I was wondering about that because you want
the same
a repetition of exactly. So you're actually using the first cut that you did as a stencil.
Yeah, very much so.
As a template.
Then
and are they doing mosaics and quilt-like things, or do they take it in different directions, or how does that?
I allow them to analyze what's happening, and I give them the space to kind of think freely about their process, their own process, because process is important, and I don't want the same image over and over so I allow them to look at it and see what comes to mind. And then, the process of sketching it out and the process of talking to talk to your other students. What do they feel? What do they think? What do they see?
So do you have the students bring in things for
things
materials
they find,
that they find?
Things they find in their own neighborhood, right? Maybe old cereal boxes, things that it would just go straight to the trash can.
Right.
And things that's kind of purchased a lot at home, like parents read the newspaper a lot. What can you do with the newspaper after you finish reading them?
what they're exposed to is pre-made.
Yes.
You know, I always lamented that because my formative years were I was engaged with creating my own little world, you know, and my friends and I would build with them. You could fit them together, and we had the best time, you know, making something it was early form of recycling or whatever, you know, back in the day. But this is sort of feels similar. You know, things that you see, you start to see the world differently. Like how can I use all this stuff around me as a raw material for creating art, and then how does the art transform these mundane, you know, throwaway items into something that has potency and has you know, a whole story.
Yeah, the layers like you're talking about are very important. You know, this idea of being able to communicate these stories that are memories, and they live, you know, they live long. When you see a piece of work that it, you know, reminds you, you go somewhere, you talk about mosaic, they can think about this project here. Oh, I did something like that when I was younger, and it's a memory that you won't forget, and it's something that kind of relieves stress. And, you know, I think in the time where everything is moving so fast, to sit down and just like cut, paste, and just be at one where you can just think out your thoughts is very important, especially for young people. You know, that's something that's needed.
Absolutely. So all of you folks at home, start to take a look at the world around you and see, you know, what possibilities there are for repurposing all the stuff that we live in a throwaway world. But you know, as Dennis is demonstrating, that, you know, there are creative approaches that could stimulate your imagination in ways that are so life-affirming. I mean, working with your hands, you know, and you don't need fancy materials, you know, and there shouldn't be that attitude like, oh, you know, everything in the art supply store is so expensive and prohibitive. But no, you know, everything is fair game, you know.
Look through your junk drawer, look through your closet, you know. There's materials that can be, you know, repurposed, reused to create something beautiful, you know.
Okay, so Dennis, we are now in the garden that's right directly behind your studio. What's going on here?
So this is the Kelly Street Community Garden. This is a place where I come out on a day like this that is beautiful. I just come out here, you know, do some paintings, do some work, but also my connection to this garden is where I do cooking workshops with the community in this neighborhood here, and also do workshops about, you know, healthy living, the idea of what we grow and how do we use what we grow, what's the benefits of what we're eating, and I do a lot of this with the young people in the neighborhood. So we have a couple of different programs here at the Kelly Street Garden. We have a youth program, and then we have the community members themselves who come and they grow what they grow, they eat, you know, we weigh it, and then we also, you know, the workshops are attended by the community members just to get understanding of what's growing here and what's useful in their daily eating behavior.
And you have plants that you use to make things from.
I do a lot of herbal medicine, and I teach them how to create their own soaps, how to create their own toothpaste, deodorants, and kind of also what's in what we buy and what we're putting on our bodies and what we're eating. So kind of taking care of the inner and the outer part of our bodies. There's art in the idea of healing. And so when I teach young people, this is the importance of kind of paying close attention of what you put in your body.
How long has there been a garden here?
So this garden has been active for the last 5 years. There was gardens in the 80s, but they renovated, and now this is what they call the new Kelly Street Garden. Yeah.
Okay, Dennis, it's been such a pleasure. Really appreciate you sharing your art and your inspiration with us. And thank you all for joining us here on Kelly Street in the Bronx on Art and About with Danny Halbin on BronxNet.